Hi everyone, my name is Candice Spence, GM of Marketing at the AFA. And look, I'm really excited to introduce you to today's webinar, which is titled Words of Advice, Building Trusted Relationships, Insights from an Industry Superfund, which is brought to you in partnership with Australian Retirement Trust. Now I'm going to call them ART if that's okay going forward.
That's fine.
Today you're going to hear from Joshua Van Gestel, ART's National Education Manager. Now, Joshua is responsible for developing and delivering ART's education strategy to members, employers, advisors, and representative bodies. In his role, he also oversees the development of bespoke multi-channel communication strategies for key clients and partners. Joshua's got over 25 years extensive experience within financial services, education, and media organizations. In today's webinar, Joshua will showcase insights and learnings gleaned from a recent in-depth survey of ART's advised members into the foundations of trust. This webinar will help you explore how to strengthen your client relationships through an even deeper understanding of what clients value, what they expect, and what they rely upon from a financial advisor's relationship. Before we begin, I'll quickly cover off housekeeping. Today's webinar will be worth 1 CPD hour available, and we'll send out details within the next week to you. We'll answer questions at the end of this presentation, so please use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, as you can see in this slide. Now, Joshua, thanks for putting on this webinar and bringing this important information together to help our members. Over to you. Let's kick off.
Thanks very much, Candice. And I'd like to thank all of you for actually giving us your valuable time today to be part of this. And I really am looking forward to sharing with you some of the wonderful insights that we've actually gained in this piece of research. But before I do that, I just wanted to first acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands for which we all live, work and walk. And I'd like to pay my respects especially to the Turrbal and Yagara peoples who are the traditional owners of this land, Brisbane, that I'm coming to you from today. I've actually travelled up from Sydney, so I'd like to also just pay my respect to those lands that I travelled over in getting here. I would like to also acknowledge and maybe reflect when it comes to webinars and presentations, I always like to start with a little bit of a story. And for me, probably the most pertinent story, you may have picked up from my surname that I am Dutch. And it was wonderful to see that the Dutch actually won their first game in the World Cup this morning. The reason why I raise this is the Dutch are well known as being an incredibly technical football team. They're also known as having some wonderful, wonderful players. But I must admit, maybe because of what we experienced a few years ago, that I don't fully trust the Dutch to actually come out with a win. So it was beautiful to see that they achieved that. Now, it might seem a strange segue, but today's webinar is all about trust and relationships, and actually about how we develop trust as those relationships go on. As Candice said, we have done some really insightful research of our advised members, but I'm also going to give you some insights into research that we conducted with financial advisors, as well as research from our non-advised membership. And there's a couple of reasons I'm going to do that. But before I steal my own thunder in that regard, I just wanted to state that the information that we're going through today is of a general nature only. And so please do reach out to us if you want further information on anything we go through, including how we can support you in using us as a financial advisor, and also support you where you've got clients with us. Now, as I said, Australian Retirement Trust is a very large fund. In fact, we're one of the largest funds in Australia, and in fact, one of the largest 20 pension funds globally. And there's probably two key things that I take away from that. The first is that from an Australian perspective, 1 in 5 employers use us. And that's important because I think a lot of people look at Australian Retirement Trust and maybe pigeonhole us, maybe view us as being a traditional industry fund, maybe having younger, less engaged members, and also probably members that have smaller balances and perhaps are from a particular industry. But because Australian Retirement Trust represents 1 in 5 employers around the country, it means that our membership is incredibly diverse. It also means, as the largest provider of corporate and institutional employer partnership in this country to help them with their superannuation obligations, that we do have a high net worth membership as well. And I'll give some further insight into that in a moment. The other thing I reflect on, though, in terms of our size and scale is that of the almost 20 million Australians with superannuation, we have 2 million. It means that we do represent a very large number, 10% in fact, of all the Australians with superannuation. And so by the research we've conducted, although it is giving us a view of our own membership, I encourage you to think about the view, the representative view, that actually gives us of the broader Australian population. For Australian Retirement Trust, it is a key focus for us to continue to leverage this size and scale we have in things like the research I'll be going through, but also the investment decisions that we make and in fact the way we service you and we service your clients. And these are facts I will come back to throughout the presentation today. But in actually putting this presentation together, and as Candice actually said in her opening, there's probably 2 key words that we have as part of the title and as part of the research, and that is thinking about trust and also relationship. And if you think about these 2 words, really it is saying that it is where someone gives confidence in someone else, in their ability. It is where someone is actually instilling confidence in them and expecting something in return. Our research actually uncovered some very probably areas that we weren't quite expecting in regard to what clients expect in return from instilling that trust in you, in financial advisors. But before I do go through some of those initial findings, what I first want to reflect on is, as I said in our opening, who is our membership? Maybe try and dispel some of those views that people may pigeonhole for us. What you can see here is that although there is a large percentage of our membership that, yes, is of that pre-retirement age, we also have a significant amount of our advised membership who is under the age of 50, about half in fact. And that really reflects the fact that we are a superannuation fund with a very young membership. And as I said in my opening, we're also a super fund that has a very broad employee representation, which means that we do have cohorts of very active, very high net worth young membership that is actually seeking out advice. What we also have in terms of balance is over 50% of our members who are advised have a balance of over $200,000, and that over 1 in 10 of our advised members actually have a balance in excess of $500,000. So some of these I will pull out as we go through the research today. But again, as I said, what I'm trying to show you here is that this is really representative of the broader Australian superannuation population. So we're presenting research today about our membership, but again, reflect on what this represents more broadly of those 20 million people in our society with superannuation savings. So with this in mind, we actually went out and did research that did 4 main things. And it sought from advised members their views on why they are actually using a financial advisor. And that might sound obvious, but it actually did bring some really surprising insights to us. We've also asked them, what advice did they actually receive? And it's important to actually think about that what they are actually seeking from an advisor and the advice that they ended up receiving is not always the same. Actually, there were some quite distinct differences between those two, between the wants and what they actually received. But we want to then find out, well, from that advice they received, what was the value that they obtained from that experience? And we can talk about things like receiving financial value or tangible value, such as through improved investments or outcomes or insurances or whatever it may be. But the other thing we want to touch on today very clearly is where is the value that is more visceral than that? Where is the emotional value that comes from it? Now, the research that we conducted occurred in August this year. So it is very, very timely. It is very fresh. And as I said, it will give some reflection about how people are currently feeling. So the first thing that we did was we went out to our advised members and said, disregarding superannuation, what is the type of advice that you received from your advice experience? And we saw here what we expected, that there were elements of product and estate planning and portfolio construction. And that point on portfolio construction is one that I am going to come back to. But what we also saw was that overarching all of this, or most prominent, not surprising, is that people were receiving advice on insurance, investments, and retirement planning. Now, none of this should really surprise any of us, nor should it surprise us that those with a higher balance were actually wanting more of what's on the right-hand side of screen, and nor should it surprise us that those who were older were also wanting more of what was on the right-hand side of the screen, particularly around retirement. But where it got different was by saying to these advised members, what is the advice that you actually are seeking? What is it that you are wanting as the outcome here? Now, before I do talk to these results, I just want to also explain that what we've overlaid here is the advised members' tenure. Their tenure, not with you as a financial advisor, but their tenure with us as a member. So as we go through this research and when we talk about tenure, where we've got tenure of under 5 years, you can pretty much assume or presume that those members have come to us through an advisor relationship. Our members with a longer tenure, certainly those of greater than 10 years, are more likely to have been members with us who have then gone on to seek advice. So again, those with short tenure have probably come to us and joined us through an advisor relationship. Those with longer tenure have probably obtained advice as part of their member journey. Why that's important is that we saw that tenure didn't really change people's views on why they were seeking advice. And we had here that people were wanting to actually get investments knowledge or knowledge of portfolios, and also, as we've just reflected, a clear pathway to retirement. But where we saw some really interesting outcomes, and probably some outcomes we didn't entirely expect, is that they wanted increased confidence in decisions. They didn't so much in this sense want those monetary outcomes or those product outcomes. They wanted to feel more confident with what they were doing. And it's interesting to see that as tenure goes on, the need for that confidence actually reduces, that they do become more comfortable. We see the same to some extent with wanting peace of mind, and also the same when it comes to, and sorry, the lights have actually just gone out in the room I'm in. We also saw the same come up when it comes to seeking out expert opinion and experience. That as people have got a longer tenure with us as members, they do feel more comfortable, they do have a stronger peace of mind, and they do feel that they've got other areas being looked after by their financial advisor. But again, I highlight here the difference between what they're seeking and the advice that they received, which was outlined in the previous slide. So we then went on to ask, well, what does advice bring to you as value? And there were two results that were quite striking. The first was that a vast majority said that financial advice and a relationship with a financial advisor gave them someone that they could trust. And we also saw a majority say that it meant that they had someone basically on their side to look after their interests. And this was also something that we saw come through in the verbatim responses of the research, this real sense of having someone in my corner. That's what my advisor is there for. My advisor is there to look after my interests, as well as someone that I trust and who provides me with support. The other thing that we saw, particularly for those who were newer members with short tenure, so those that had come to us through an advice relationship, is that they actually also saw simplicity and trust as key points of value. Okay, so in addition to what we saw here, for those newer members, simplicity was also a much stronger driver. But let's have a look at that idea of trust. And again, I've got a tenure overlay here. So when it comes to the value an advisor brings, as you can see here, we saw quite consistently, regardless of tenure, that they felt the advisor brings them value in getting to retirement. But where we also saw some really interesting findings was in regard to simplicity and trust, as I've talked about, that was really strong for newer members that had come to us through advice. But it's also this strong sense of acting in my best interest. Now, I point these out because the three strongest responses here were not about product, were not about outcome, were not about the particular advice they were receiving. It is all here again about visceral emotion. What did the advice experience leave them feeling? And this is really important, and it was striking through all the results that we received. The thing that was important and the thing that incites trust from a client to their advisor is actually the emotional outcome, not necessarily the product outcome. But if we do want to just reflect at the moment on some of those product areas, and I said earlier I wanted to speak to this one, we have there that 1 in 5 of our advised members actually said to us that portfolio construction was really important to them from the advice experience. Now, this is our members talking about advice, about their advisor, helping them with providing portfolio construction. The reason why I reflect on this is because this is largely members who are using our multi-asset or diversified options in a lot of cases. So our asset allocation that we have for our multi-asset options basically flows through the advisor to the recommendations made to the client. So in other words, the advisor is benefiting in some way from our own asset allocations that we determine. And I raise this point because, as you'll see throughout the research as we go on, there are points where we must be symbiont. There are points where the advisor and us as the super fund provider working together make an incredible impact. And that portfolio construction element, for me, was probably one of the most obvious. The other thing that was obvious was that members trust us. But this is really important for me to reflect on from your perspective, because we know that the more an advised member trusts us, the more they actually trust their advisor as well. So if I just reflect on their trust in Australian Retirement Trust, we had 4 in 5. So over 80% of our advised members say that they trust us. And I'll talk to you about what that means in a moment. We have more than half say that it was important for them and that trust was really around this idea of being in a safe and secure place. And I find this really interesting. Again, this research was done in August, so before the Optus breach and before the Medibank breach. In terms of data, I'd be really interested to even see whether that has shifted if we were to do this again. But this is what we're talking about, that someone feels financially secure, but they also trust that their information and their money is also safe and secure. We then had about 40% say to us that there is nothing that could make them leave Australian Retirement Trust, that they trusted us so implicitly and had such formed trust in us that they wouldn't leave. And that, again, is something I'll come back to. But as I said, the point here isn't about us. It really isn't. The point here is about having more trust in us actually reflects upon the financial advisor. And we can say this because we asked our advised members, does having a strong super fund actually help in the building of advisor trust? And as you can see here, significant amount, well over half, in fact, over 65% said yes, the choice of superannuation fund is integral to my trust in my advisor. So again, I reflect on that a strong sense of trust in us does flow through to a strong sense of trust in you. So this is where we start to build up some of these observations. Portfolio construction that we provide can flow through to the recommendations that you provide. The trust that we provide through what we do and how we do it also flows through to you as an advisor. Now, it's important to note, obviously, and probably this won't surprise, that as a balance increases, we see a person's level of trust increase. So we had 65% in general say that superannuation fund choice was important in their trust of advisor. That increased to 75% where their balance was greater than $500,000. We also saw that it was crucial for those over the age of 60. Again, 75% of them said that it was important in that regard. But what is it that actually builds this trust? Well, we asked our members, what does being in a trusted fund mean to you? And this actually gave us some really interesting findings to reflect on. We thought that the 3 main areas in terms of building trust with us would be strong investment performance, low fees, and also being a profit for member fund. But as you can see, that profit for member fund element really didn't resonate strongly with members over other things. And that's something I'm actually going to come back to because it resonated very differently with the research we did of financial advisors. The other thing I just want to reflect on here, though, is I would suggest to you that low fees and strong performance shouldn't be be something that a member has to go out of their way to expect. This should just be something that is provided to them through being a good super fund. So you should just take it for granted that the fees will be low. You should just take it for granted that performance will continue to be strong. Now, they might be very big statements for me to make, but the basis on which I say those is largely because of the performance test. The performance test that has been put in place, specifically around MySuper, but we've seen it permeate through to all other investment options, is that it has forced the industry to drive down fees to improve performance. So just take it for granted, low fees is going to be provided. We've also seen the performance test and the benchmark really see a lot of funds focus on driving that stronger performance of meeting the benchmark. So just assume it's going to be there. From Australian Retirement Trust point of view, I would say that we were already there. We already had low fees. We already had strong proven performance. These weren't things that we've had to go out of our way to improve. What these results highlight from my perspective, is if we can lock those in as being things that we should just provide to you and to your clients, then we should also focus more strongly on those other areas. That we should really look to uplift the importance that clients see in us being a profit for members fund, that they see in us being an ethical fund, that they see in the way they interact with us, with our customer service or with our digital engagement. Now, as I said in a previous slide, about 40% of our members said that they wouldn't shift, that their trust in us is so strong that they are a committed member with us. But there are areas for us to reflect on that 60% still said that they could be swayed. And so it's important for us to reflect on what could sway them. Again, I apply tenure to this. And that we really see for those that are very new members with a short tenure, recommendation from their advisor as quickly as it has brought them into us could take them away. They really do at this stage have their strong confidence in their advice relationship and the advice recommendation, and they're not at this point really strongly connected with us. They don't have that strong sense of trust in us. We also see, though, that there is this strong view that trust will be maintained through things like fees and performance. So making sure that we provide those and continue to provide those, as I've outlined, should just be taken for granted. If they are fundamental in shifting trust, then we have to make sure that they never in fact shift. So let's just think about then what you as advisors are saying to us, and particularly where this differs to what our advised members are saying. So what I'm showing here is what we had from members in relation to the areas that they actually saw as strong requirements for a super fund to provide in features. And again, we see this sense of strong performance and low fees, and to a much lesser extent, a trusted brand and strong technology. We saw the reverse in almost all of these facets, except for the brand, which I'll come back to in a moment, but we saw the reverse in every other area. That for advisors, the strong focus on performance and fees wasn't there. It still exists, but it just wasn't as strong. And I wonder if I actually interpret this, whether that to some extent is because of our relationship with advisors and our focus with advisors over some years now, but also the tenure advisors have with us. Some of these member responses are coming from members who are very new. Whereas some of the responses from advisors are coming from advisors that we've had a relationship for many years. That element of trust is there with the advisor as well. And the lights just miraculously came back on. We also saw this very strong difference when it comes to good technology. And again, this is something that I interpret in that, yes, it's important to members to be able to access their fund digitally in terms to be able to view them on their mobile or online and have access to information. But it is very strong for a financial advisor to have this. Members aren't perhaps so driven by this as they are by consistent performance and consistent low fees. But for advisors, this is crucial to how you interact with us. If you have strong technology from your super funds, then it means that you can focus on doing your job instead of focusing on meeting the fund's administration requirements, reporting requirements, having to deal with customer service, etc. And this is a very clear response that we've actually reflected on. And I think about over recent years, we have made significant improvements to the way that financial advisors interact with us. We have made significant improvements to the technology we have in place with advisors, and we have continued in that commitment. I actually reflect on our merger in February this year, and there were two very strong, clear commitments that were made almost immediately. And that was to continue focusing on the technology uplift that we provide for our employer clients, as well as continue the strong uplift and focus on the technology platforms that we use for advisors who interact with us. So this is something that these results really confirm we've got right. So when we spoke to advisors directly about what matters to you in your partnership with not just us, but thinking about superannuation more broadly, a very stark difference to clients or advised members was the need for a trusted brand. Remember, for advised members, this barely rated a mention, but for advisors, it is incredibly important. And to some extent, I reflect on whether this might be that our experience of things like the review of financial service and of financial products had such a big impact on the way that we see things, the way we interact with members, and the way that they interact with us. Trust and brand are vital. Was also vital from financial advisors that we have a broad investment selection, including low-cost index options. But it was also important, more so than we saw with members, that we be an ethical fund. And I think this might align with that sense of a trusted brand. But also it was more important for advisors than it was for advised clients that we were a profit for member fund. So again, it's really interesting to see here that the ways that advisors trust in us and the relationship that advisors have in us is very different to the ways that members or advised members trust in us and the relationship that they want. We are significantly recommended from advisors when we ask them about how they feel about us. We know that advisors have a very high satisfaction score with us, particularly those who have more assets with us, who have more clients with us. But you can see here again some areas of similarity to advised members: low cost and low fees, investment opportunities and investment performance. But again, I would say to you, assume these are given. Assume that these will be provided to you. These are fundamental to us maintaining trust. And as I've already said, that changes in the industry, including benchmarking and the test that happens with funds around that, will almost lock those in. So it is thinking about those other areas, about advisor servicing, about the way that we actually relate to you and that you actually respond with us that become really important. So there is opportunity here. And what our research also looked at was, well, how is advice important in regard to our broader membership? And what we found was that more than double our non-advised membership actively would promote us. They have a very strong view of us, a very strong net promoter score of how they would actually talk about us to their friends, family, and colleagues. So again, this is that third element of our symbiont relationship where actually trust in the advisor and the experience of coming to us actually does improve a member's view of us. But we also see a stark improvement in the engagement that they have with us. Where they're advised, they are significantly more likely to undertake simple but really important steps. Things like a binding nomination. Typically, less than 5% of our non-advised members would have a binding nomination in place, but for our clients, that is getting close to 40%. You see a bigger uptake as well around reversionary nomination. In other words, we see clients through their advisor making sure that their account is fully set up how they need it to be. But we also see them having a more active interest in their account, that we see a much greater proportion of them logging in to Member Online and using other member tools, such as the mobile app. They are more engaged and seeing what's happening with their money and, as we've seen in the results, more comfortable. The other reflection I would have, though, is the activity that they don't do. We also can reflect on the COVID period and that our advised clients were incredibly less likely, significantly so, not to make an investment change when we saw the financial crisis really hit. We saw them stay the course. And it was that comfort that they have through their advisor that permeated through to the activity they took with us, which is a direct reflection again of their trust in us to provide strong performance over time. We know that our advised members are more likely to contribute and more likely to consolidate. And as a result, we know that their balances will be healthier, that they will be significantly better off than non-advised members across all age cohorts, as well as across all gender cohorts. Now, yes, there is still work that we have to do here in closing the gender gap, but this is a really important insight to show the value that advice provides. And I'm not just talking about limited advice or general advice. I am talking here about the comprehensive advice relationship, the relationship that you have with your clients who are members with Australian Retirement Trust. So to just finish off, and then we'll move into Q&A, what's our broader membership tell us about financial advice? It's great to get these insights from those people who are already aware of the benefits and see the success and the value of that advice. But what's the rest of our members tell us? Well, when asked, will financial advice help you achieve your financial goals? Overwhelmingly, our non-advised members said that yes, it will. More than half of our non-advised members that we researched said financial advice will be important to me meeting those goals. But when we asked them then, well, how likely are you to seek out advice in the next 12 months, knowing it will benefit you, we saw that the take-up was only about 20%. So there is work here to do. There is work here around making sure our members fully understand the value of advice, that they fully understand our advice proposition. Again, from going from general advice, which myself and my team provide through education, through to limited advice, right through to the comprehensive advice that we partner with you all on. So remember the reasons why our research is showing our members are using a financial advisor. 3 in 5 were seeking expert opinion, half wanted help in retirement, but 2 in 5 wanted peace of mind and confidence. I've said this word numerous times. It's one of my favourite words in the dictionary, actually. They feel visceral about the advice they receive. They're not just seeing results, they're receiving comfort. They are actually more comfortable with what they are receiving from you and what you're saying they will receive. So I really encourage you to consider, how can you build these insights into your conversations, your experiences, to not just give your clients results, but to build their confidence in you and their trust in you, to let them know that you are in their corner, that you do have their back. And consider if your proposition needs to shift and the way that you engage your clients need to shift. Is it focused on outcomes and products and numbers, or do you already deal with some of this emotional element? We're not just talking here with outcomes, we're talking here about how someone is feeling. So reflect on what they tell us they actually value. Reflect on the value that they seek beyond those outcomes that maybe we often think they're after, and seek out the opportunity to just build that trust more with your clients. So on that note, we'll go over to Q&A. Candice, I don't know, I haven't actually had an eye on the Q&A, so I'm not sure whether any questions have come through.
Hi, Joshua. Look, thanks for that really interesting presentation. Look, we actually had one from Lawrence saying, what is the writing above you, Joshua? I can't see any writing above you, so I'm not sure what that was, but we'll just allow some questions to come in. Joshua, and I mean, I found that really interesting. The insights are amazing. And I think what's really important was, you know, that the members that have a financial advisor seem far more confident in everything, including even the use of technology, you know. So love seeing that Art are really, you know, supportive of the financial advisor's role, you know, and really advocating for that, which is terrific. Look, I've got a couple of questions to start you off. You mentioned portfolio construction as benefiting from your own asset allocations within your diversified multi-asset options. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, so as I said, this was an insight that was really interesting to us, that we had members saying to us that the advice they valued and areas of trust that they saw with Australian Retirement Trust were in portfolio construction. And so thinking about my advice background, that portfolio construction is, you know, we're making that recommendation to our clients as to how we will diversify their assets and their investments. But in the research, what that actually showed was that advisors were putting clients into our investment options and our diversified options, and therefore diversifying their assets. And that just flowed through to the advisor's own portfolio recommendations. They were effectively recommending our asset allocation. And Candice, it's where there were some significant points where I talked about this symbiont relationship that advisors and we as a fund really need to have, and trust in each other. And I saw that as crucial, that if we're providing good investments with the right mix of assets and the right diversification of assets, and if they're being reflected in advisors' recommendations, then that is an incredible outcome of that relationship and that trust, I think, that advisors are forming in us as well.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah. I mean, trust is number one, isn't it, really, in all the relationships? And the clients just need that, and never more than in today's world.
Absolutely.
Look, and actually a question on that, you know, a lot of members said, look, they were influenced by having money in a safe and secure place.
Yep.
Do you want to elaborate there at
all?
Yeah,
again, I think it'd be interesting, as I said, to reflect on that post Optus and Medibank data breach. I'm actually a member of AHM, and I got that dreaded letter on the weekend saying that basically everything had been accessed of mine. But I think if we think pre-data breach, that question would have related to that trust and security is all about investment performance. Very strongly, it would be a reflection on, I trust my advisor, and by virtue of that, trust the fund to be providing me with the results and outcomes that I need, that I want. If we ask that question today, which is why I made the observation, I wonder how much of that question would actually relate to things like data integrity. I even reflect in my own world. I've been traveling around the country over the last couple of months, presenting to employers, advisors, and to members. I have been asked in every single forum, in every event that I've run over the last few months, about that data integrity, about that data security. And so, although the research probably is focusing more on the investment outcomes that we provide and the security that provides, I actually also reflect on that as being, in the current climate, probably also thinking a bit about technology and data security as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, look, it's challenging times on both sides, you know, with markets having been a bit crazy, and also obviously the data breaches. Now, look, advisors and members saw some of the core features, you know, what's important to them a little bit differently, which is kind of understandable. But was there anything in particular that you felt you know, kind of surprised you enormously?
I wouldn't say there was an area that surprised us enormously, except probably that we saw these very distinct, well, I'm going to backtrack on what I just said now. Probably two things that surprised us. Was that for advisors, it was much more important that we were seen as an ethical fund, whereas for advised members, that really wasn't important. And I wonder, Candice, whether it's almost the assumption from an advised member, if you're advising us to be in a certain product, I trust that that is a ethical product. And there was also the second one, quite aligned to that, was that advisors saw it as more important to be with a trusted brand than advised members did. And again, I take that as members just trusting in the advisor's decision and their due diligence and their recommendation. The third area, though, which perhaps was surprising to some extent, but also we could maybe reflect on and say, well, it makes sense, is that technology piece. That for advisors, it was far, far, far more important that there be a strong technology support there than it is for the members themselves. And I think about that members, they want to be able to look at their account and see what their investments are doing and do things simply. But advisors have to interact with us on a daily basis. And the changes that we make for advisors are fundamental in changing the advisor's relationship with us and making that easier. So that's probably where the most distinct outcome was on technology, but that's probably how I view it, that a member's interaction once they're with us is much simpler, whereas an advisor's interaction has to continue to actually have a lot more work involved. Yeah. Thanks, Joshua. Look, a couple of questions that have come in. Look, one is,
can we have a copy of the presentation slides? And yes, look, this is something that we will make available, including a recording of this presentation in about 24 hours or so. We'll put that up on the website for everybody, so you'll be able to access them. Now, Gavin's has supplied a question on asset allocation.
Yep.
Are term deposits available, particularly in pension phase? If so, how many providers are available to choose from? Because our clients find great security in them. So,
yeah, we don't actually have any specific provider-driven term deposits. That's not part of what we have. We do absolutely have 19 investment options, and part of those would invest in fixed interest assets, but we do not allow for clients to directly hold fixed term deposits as part of their account.
Yeah. But for that sort of certainty and security, the fixed interest options are obviously probably equally attractive, I would imagine, Josh.
Absolutely. But I think there's also, I think the reflection that they're products that we probably directly, I would say, clients haven't really wanted to go near over recent years.
Yes.
And certainly our views are what we're doing with that. If I think about that portfolio construction, how our mix of assets provides consistent outcomes over time, and that includes reweighting, how we're using fixed interest and things like that. But certainly no, we don't offer direct access to fixed interest products through other providers.
Yeah, can do that. Okay, no, great, thanks. Look, that might be just about it from attendees, and look, I really found that really interesting insights there, and really appreciate you spending the time, Joshua. I know you're a very busy gentleman going all over the country. I think you mentioned earlier to us prior to the webinar that you've got another 5 or 6 visits in the next 2 weeks around the country.
I'm looking very forward to spending Christmas in Sydney.
Yeah, so Christmas with the family and some downtime.
Yep.
But look, appreciate what you guys at ART are doing as well. It all sounds really positive, and I think asking your members, again and again is always great to get that feedback about, what's important to them. And look, a great case for financial advice, I have to say, in those results. So
thank you, Candice.
Let's bring on more. Thank you so much, Joshua. As I said, everybody, thanks for attending, and the presentation will be available online in the next 24 hours. Thank you, Mel, in the background, and Dee, and everybody have a terrific day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.